They offer you a beautiful gilded key. It promises freedom, reconciliation, an end to the conflict. But this key does not unlock your chains. It locks you inside their cage, built from your own words. Why do we willingly hand our enemies the one weapon they cannot forge for themselves? Why do we trade our power for the illusion of peace? Observe the scene. It is a ritual as old as power itself. You are surrounded, not by soldiers with swords, but by something far more potent, the weight of expectant eyes. The air is thick with the hiss of whispers and the gleam of sanctimony. A demand is made. It is not a request for dialogue, it is a summons. They do not ask for your perspective, they demand your confession. They call this a path to healing, a chance for atonement. But look closer. This is not a sanctuary for reconciliation. It is a courtroom, and you have been brought here not to be understood, but to be sentenced. The common man, raised on philosophies of fairness and moral accountability, sees this as an opportunity. He believes that by offering an apology, he can build a bridge across the divide, disarm his critics with sincerity and restore a broken harmony. He believes that admitting a fault is an act of strength. This is the noble, predictable, and fatal miscalculation of the idealist. He sees a hand extended in peace and fails to notice the shackles it holds. This ritual of public submission is a meticulously engineered power play. The demand for your apology is never about the transgression itself. The original sin is merely the pretext, the convenient casus belli for a war of domination. The true objective is to force you into a public performance of your own inferiority. It is a psychological siege. Your accusers, be they a rival, a mob, or a single cunning manipulator, are positioning themselves as the arbiters of morality. They have built a narrative in which they are the righteous victims and you are the malevolent aggressor. Every moment you hesitate, every word you speak in your own defense, is twisted and presented as further proof of your arrogance, your lack of remorse. The pressure mounts. The siren's call for resolution becomes deafening. The desire to simply make it all end, to feel the relief of absolution, becomes an overwhelming physical need. And in that moment of weakness, you consider offering them what they want. You prepare to utter the words, "I am sorry." You see it as a key to unlock the door and walk away free, but you are mistaken. You are not being handed a key. You are being handed a pen to sign a confession whose terms you do not control and whose consequences will be permanent. You are about to willingly place your neck upon the block, believing the executioner will praise you for your cooperation just before the blade falls. Here, we must abandon the comforting falsehoods of the idealist and turn to the cold, immutable logic of the prince. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that the most fundamental and absolute form of power is not control over armies or treasuries, but control over reality itself. The ultimate authority belongs to the one who can define the narrative, to dictate who is the hero and who is the villain, who is the creditor and who is the debtor. In any conflict, the true battle is for the position of the judge. Your opponent's primary strategy is to maneuver you into the defendant's chair, and the most effective way to do this is to have you admit your own guilt. The moment an apology leaves your lips, the entire dynamic of power shifts irrevocably. You are no longer a peer in a dispute. You are a subordinate pleading your case. You have formally validated their grievance. You have confirmed their reality. You have handed them the gavel, and with it, the right to pass judgment upon you. From that point forward, the conflict is no longer a negotiation, it is a sentencing hearing. You have sacrificed your authority for their forgiveness, but you fail to understand that forgiveness is not a gift. It is a currency they now control, a privilege they can grant, withhold, or revoke at their leisure to ensure your continued subjugation. The prince understands that an apology is a strategic transaction, and it is the worst bargain a man of power can make. You are trading a tangible asset, your authority, your reputation, your unblemished record, for an intangible promise of mercy from an enemy who has already proven their hostile intent. It is an act of unilateral disarmament. As Machiavelli observed, men are quick to exploit any weakness they perceive. Men are so simple, he wrote, and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. In the theater of power, your sincerity is irrelevant. Your apology will not be seen as a sign of strength or moral character. It will be recorded and remembered as an admission of weakness, a precedent to be used against you in all future conflicts. It becomes their greatest weapon because you forged it for them and delivered it into their hands. It is the proof that their accusations were valid, their aggression was justified, and their victory was earned. They did not have to defeat you. You chose to defeat yourself. To apologize is to surrender the moral high ground, abandoning your fortress on the hill to beg for entry at the gates of your enemy. A wise ruler does not give up his strategic position. He reinforces it. This is the first truth of power. Justice is not a divine truth to be discovered, but a brutal weapon to be wielded. Whoever wields it first wins. Comment, I am the judge, to reclaim control of your narrative, and subscribe to learn how to turn accusations into counterattacks. So, the prince does not apologize. He does not surrender the judge's gavel. This is the first inviolable law. But to mistake this for simple, brutish intransigence is to misunderstand the art of power entirely. The master strategist does not merely reject the weapons of his enemy, he learns to melt them down and recast them into his own. If the demand for a confession is an inescapable political reality, then the prince does not resist it. He perfects it. He transforms the apology from a shield of the weak into a dagger for the strong. He understands that if a confession must be made, it will be made on his terms in his time and for his own hidden purpose. What the idealist sees as a moment of humiliating defeat, the prince recognizes as a rare opportunity to perform a masterclass in psychological warfare. The amateur confesses to seek pardon, the master confesses to seize control. This is the esoteric doctrine of the strategic confession, an arsenal of contrition built upon a single pragmatic principle, the economy of blame. In any conflict, blame is a commodity. It has weight, value, and it can be moved, divided, and allocated like gold in a treasury. The common man believes he must either accept all the blame or deny it completely. He sees it as a binary choice between total guilt and total innocence. This is a peasant's understanding of finance. The prince, however, is a master of this economy. He knows that power resides not in being blameless, but in managing blame as a resource. He can absorb a small calculated amount of it to create a much larger strategic advantage. He can pay a small tax of guilt to avoid a catastrophic political cost. This is the apology of limited liability. It is the art of seeming to confess everything, while in truth confessing nothing of substance. Consider the craft. The prince will never apologize for his core intention, his ambition, or the strategic necessity of his actions. To do so would be to admit his entire enterprise is illegitimate. Instead, he will identify a peripheral, procedural, or aesthetic element of the conflict and offer that up as a sacrifice. He will express regret not for the decision he made, but for the manner in which it was communicated. He will lament that his words were open to misinterpretation, placing the fault not on his idea, but on the flawed perception of others. He will concede that the timing of the action was regrettable, while implicitly reinforcing the action's fundamental correctness. This is a surgical maneuver. He is offering the baying mob a piece of flesh, but it is a piece he has carefully selected and can afford to lose. It satisfies their primitive hunger for a sacrifice. It allows them to feel victorious, and it paints the prince as a reasonable, reflective leader, capable of self-correction. All the while, the core structure of his power, the very decision they sought to condemn, remains untouched, sanctified, and now, ironically, strengthened by his performance of humility. He has given them a shadow, and in return secured the substance. This maneuver does more than merely preserve his power, it actively undermines his opponents. By admitting a minor, insignificant fault, he seizes the moral high ground from those who demand absolute condemnation. He appears nuanced while they appear fanatical. He seems willing to compromise while they seem bent on destruction. He has held a mirror up to their aggression, and the reflection they now cast is that of unreasonable zealots. He has divided his enemies between the moderates, who are satisfied by his gesture, and the extremists, who are now isolated by their continued attacks. He has mastered the economy of blame, by understanding that a small public payment can purchase him enormous silent dividends in political capital. He has not surrendered. He has invested. But the true genius of the prince is revealed not in defense but in attack. He understands that a crisis demanding an apology is a chaotic, unpredictable event. It is a blow dealt by what Machiavelli called fortuna. Fortune is a raging river, a capricious woman, a storm that threatens to tear down everything a ruler has built. The common man stands before this storm and is broken by it. He is a victim of circumstance, a plaything of fate. But the prince possesses a quality Machiavelli called virtù. Not virtue in the moral sense, but a potent combination of audacity, skill, courage, and strategic prowess. Virtù is the human will imposing its design upon the chaos of fortuna. The man of virtù does not simply endure the storm, he builds dams to redirect its power. He hoists a sail to harness its destructive winds and propel himself forward, faster than his rivals could ever imagine. Therefore, the crisis that calls for an apology is not a setback. It is an opportunity. It is a moment of pure, malleable energy that the prince can seize to reshape the entire political landscape. The apology in his hands becomes an offensive weapon. It is a calculated act of virtù designed to force the hand of fortune. He can issue a confession that is, in fact, a veiled accusation, framing his apology in such a way that it exposes the hypocrisy of his accusers. "I must apologize," he might declare to the public, "for I have learned that in a world of perfect men, my methods might seem harsh. Unlike others who hide their actions behind a veil of secrecy, I have always acted in the open, and for that transparent honesty I am now condemned. I accept this judgment." In one stroke he has fulfilled the demand for an apology, while simultaneously branding his enemies as secretive, his methods as honest, and himself as a martyr to his own transparency. He can use the apology to pivot, to change the very subject of the debate. By confessing to a lesser transgression, he can draw all the public's attention and fury, creating a smokescreen to hide a far greater and more dangerous operation. And most powerfully, he can use the performance of contrition to rally his own allies. By appearing wounded, unfairly targeted, yet still magnanimous enough to seek peace, he ignites a fire of loyalty in his supporters. His apology becomes their call to arms. The attack meant to isolate him has, through his masterful manipulation, become the very event that consolidates his base and forges them into a more disciplined, more devoted army. He has taken the energy of their hatred and transformed it into the foundation of his throne. This is the ultimate expression of power, not merely to survive a crisis, but to feast upon it, to grow stronger from the very poison intended to kill you. The prince does not fear the judgment of his enemies. He fears only a failure of his own audacity in the face of opportunity. The demand for his surrender is simply the starting pistol for his counterattack. We have navigated the treacherous public theater where the apology is forged into a strategic asset. But the most decisive battles are not waged in the open squares or council chambers. They are fought in the silent, unforgiving territory of the human mind. First, within the mind of the prince himself, and then within the mind of his adversary. Before a ruler can master his enemies, he must achieve absolute dominion over his own soul, excising the sentimentalities and moral reflexes that would lead a lesser man to ruin. The first victory must be over the self. For the prince, this means conquering the most seductive and dangerous of human impulses, the craving for resolution. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the human psyche abhors an unresolved conflict. The tension of a standoff, the ambiguity of a feud, the lingering bitterness of a grievance, these states are profoundly uncomfortable. We are conditioned to seek closure, to find the quickest path back to a state of equilibrium. This innate desire for peace is a flaw in our psychological architecture, a vulnerability hardwired into our species. It is a weakness that the strategist must learn not only to resist within himself, but also to weaponize against others. While the common man rushes to close the wound of conflict, desperate to stop the bleeding, the prince understands that controlled tension is a source of immense power. A conflict that is concluded is a resource that has been spent. A conflict that is artfully prolonged, kept simmering just below the boiling point, becomes a perpetual engine of influence. The internal war, therefore, is against the vice of resolution. The prince must train himself to find comfort in the discomfort of others. He must learn to operate with cold detachment in the heart of the storm, while his rivals are thrown into disarray, desperate for the ordeal to end. This grants him the ultimate tactical advantage, the ability to dictate the tempo of the conflict. He who controls the timeline controls the outcome. While his enemy exhausts himself emotionally, seeking a final settlement, the prince conserves his strength, analyzing, waiting, and preparing his decisive move. The possibility of an apology, held in reserve, becomes a far more potent instrument than the apology itself. It is a source of hope for his enemy, a glimmer of a peaceful resolution that keeps them engaged, compliant, and predictable. He can dangle the prospect of a confession like a puppeteer pulling strings, forcing his opponent to react, to hope, to wait, and ultimately to waste his strategic window of opportunity. The true victory is not in ending the conflict, but in achieving a state of permanent managed instability where he is the only calm center. Once this internal mastery is achieved, the prince can turn his focus outward, to the psychological manipulation of his foe. Here we move beyond the mere performance of an apology into a darker, more perverse art form, the engineering of psychological debt. If circumstances dictate that a confession is unavoidable, the prince will not simply offer it. He will orchestrate it in such a way that it places an unbearable moral and social burden upon the recipient. He will execute the apology as a grant of magnanimity, a profound gesture of grace that transforms his opponent from a righteous victim into a petty tyrant if he dares to refuse it. This is the creation of the creditor's trap. Imagine the scene. The prince, having been hounded and accused, finally stands before his adversary. He does not offer a grudging, resentful admission. Instead, he performs an act of sublime and unexpected humility. He bows his head. He speaks not of his own justification, but of the pain his actions have caused the other. He praises his rival's unwavering commitment to their principles, acknowledging their grievance with a sincerity that is both disarming and suffocating. In doing so, he is not asking for forgiveness, he is bestowing it. He is demonstrating a moral largesse that his opponent is now socially and psychologically compelled to reciprocate. He has seized the script and recast the roles. In a breathtaking reversal, the accuser is suddenly placed on the defensive. Now the adversary faces an impossible choice. If he accepts the apology and ends the conflict, he does so on the prince's terms, appearing to have been placated by a mere performance. The prince walks away, his power intact, having demonstrated his superior character. But if the adversary rejects this beautiful, heartfelt apology, he instantly ceases to be the noble victim. In the eyes of all spectators, he becomes a cruel, vindictive brute incapable of grace, a man who delights in the humiliation of a penitent foe. His moral authority evaporates on the spot. He is exposed as someone whose goal was never justice, but domination. The prince, by kneeling, has forced his enemy to stand on a precarious pedestal from which any wrong move will send him crashing down. He has used submission to build a cage around his rival. This is the genius of the maneuver. The apology creates a debt of magnanimity. From that moment forward, the enemy is indebted to the prince. He owes him clemency. He owes him a cessation of hostilities. The apology, which should have been a payment of a debt, has instead become a tool for creating a new, more powerful one. The prince has transformed himself from the pardoned into the creditor, and his enemy is now bound by the invisible chains of public expectation, a prisoner of the very justice he sought to champion. This is the essence of Machiavellian strategy, to turn the virtues of your enemy, their sense of fairness, their desire for justice, their need for moral consistency, into the very instruments of their own defeat. You have learned to forge the confession and to manipulate the currency of debt. You have conquered the impulse for resolution within yourself and engineered it as a weakness in your enemy. Now, before we serve the final offering, ensure you are subscribed, for the ultimate art of turning an enemy's victory into his own undoing is the final lesson in the sanctum of power. We have explored the apology as a shield and as a chain. We now arrive at its most lethal form, the apology as a chalice of poison, presented with a smile, extended as an offering of peace, and designed to annihilate the recipient from within. This is the masterstroke, the culmination of all previous lessons. It is an act of supreme audacity that requires exquisite timing, a deep understanding of your target's psychology, and a complete detachment from conventional morality. The goal is no longer to survive, to manage, or to control the conflict. The goal is to terminate it by terminating the credibility, authority, and political existence of your adversary. The poisoned chalice is a confession so masterfully constructed that it appears to be an act of total surrender, while in fact it is a declaration of hidden war. It is an apology that the enemy is compelled to accept, but which contains within its very words the seeds of his own destruction. He cannot refuse the drink without appearing monstrous, yet to drink it is to swallow his own demise. The execution of this maneuver relies on the principle of embedded truths. The prince crafts a statement of contrition that on its surface is a model of humility. Yet woven into the very fabric of this admission is a devastating revelation, a piece of information that is either subtly incriminating to his opponent or fundamentally reframes the entire narrative in a way that makes his opponent's position untenable. It is a confession wrapped around a dagger. For instance, the prince might apologize for measures he was forced to take in response to a regrettable but understandable lapse in judgment from an otherwise esteemed colleague. He is apologizing for his reaction, but in doing so he has officially entered his colleague's lapse into the public record under the guise of a generous and forgiving statement. He might express profound regret for a misunderstanding caused by complex back-channel communications that I, perhaps naively, believed were being conducted in good faith. He has apologized for his naivete, but has simultaneously exposed his rival as a creature of duplicitous, behind-the-scenes maneuvering. This is the art of giving a confession that makes the recipient wish he had never asked for it. It is a public gift that becomes a private curse. Consider the most potent form of this strategy, the apology that praises the enemy with language that highlights his fatal flaw. I must offer my sincerest apologies to a man whose passionate and emotional devotion to his cause is well known, the prince might state. On the surface, it is a compliment. But it is a compliment that defines the adversary as irrational, as a man governed by passion rather than by reason and stability. He has been praised into a corner, branded with the one quality that disqualifies a man from true leadership. The enemy is forced to accept this Trojan horse of a compliment. To reject it would be to appear ungracious and petty. To accept it is to endorse the prince's subtle but devastating character assassination. He is left smiling for the crowds, holding a beautiful trophy, unaware that it is filled with poison that will seep into the foundations of his reputation and dissolve it over time. The consolidation of power that follows such a move is absolute. This is not a mere victory, it is an annihilation. The enemy has not been defeated in a noble battle, he has been made complicit in his own humiliation. He has been vanquished not by a sword, but by the very words of justice he sought to wield. The public sees the prince as a figure of immense grace, a leader who, even when wronged, had the strength to seek peace. They see his rival as neutralized, pacified, and ultimately outmaneuvered. The new order is established not on the ashes of a war, but on the chilling silence that follows a perfectly executed psychological checkmate. The prince has not only survived the crisis, he has used it to demonstrate a level of strategic mastery that terrifies all other potential challengers into submission. He has shown them that he is as dangerous when kneeling as he is when enthroned. So we arrive at the final somber truth of power. The ultimate expression of authority is not the capacity to crush your enemies with overwhelming force. It is the far more refined and terrible ability to compel them to participate in their own ruin, to guide their hands as they sign their own death warrant, and to make them thank you for the privilege. It is the understanding that the most cherished ideals of mankind, humility, justice, forgiveness, are not sacred principles that govern the world. They are merely tools, cold and sharp, waiting in the arsenal for the ruler who has the courage to see the world as it is, not as it should be, and the will to use any tool necessary to impose order on its inherent chaos. The most enduring throne is not built upon a foundation of righteousness or affection. It is built upon a profound and unflinching mastery of the weaknesses, vanities, and virtues of the human soul.